we've got more people coming in, and then that's a good idea, Vera. I'll ask you guys to introduce yourselves just while we load the rest.
I can share my screen, Darren, if you want, and I'll do the button pressing, if that helps.
We might have to in a minute. So we've got about this far to go on the progress. It's bound to happen something. All right, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's make sure everyone's admitted. Okay. All right. Is that you, Russ?
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Okay.
But just one quick thing there, though. We can't then take control, I don't think.
You can't. So what we'll do is just put that front screen up, Russ. Then I'll take it back in a moment after these guys have introduced themselves, and we'll go through it as normal.
Okay.
All right. Let's just make sure everyone's admitted. Yeah, they are. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our sustainability webinar. We've got a fantastic lineup for you from now till midday for the next hour. If you won't mind going off camera for me, just because it will then highlight the speakers for you. And what we'll do in a moment is we'll ask you to put some things in the chat. We're just loading some slides. So until then, I'm going to ask the speakers to introduce themselves for a couple of minutes. And we'll start with Steve. Steve, you've got 60 seconds on you. Who are you?
Who am I? Okay. Yeah, my name is Steve Lister. I currently run my own sustainable consultancy for global brands and retailers. I'm also the head of sustainability for Popeye UK and Ireland. So that's the association for the point of purchase. I'm also a judge for the global shop for US, North America and South America, which I've just been judging all of the displays, which has been fascinating, especially the sustainability categories. I've been in the industry for about 15, 20 years. I was in sort of like the distribution side of the business and then moved into the agency side. The last 7 years, I've been very fortunate of working in the agency side, looking after a lot of the major brands around the world, like Unilever, on their marketing print activations. And they were definitely leading the world on sustainability. So great to see Vera here today as well. So yeah, if that's not 60 seconds, I could probably start about 10 minutes. But been passionate about sustainability for about 15 years. Of those 15 years, probably 10 of them people didn't want to listen. So the last 5, it's been fascinating where this has come higher up the agenda. So really looking forward to today. So thank you for inviting me on today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. You're very welcome. Russ Sylvester from Nielsen IQ. Russ.
Hi, yeah, I'm Russell Sylvester from Nielsen. I've been here 9 years now for my sins. Previous to that, I started my retail career filling up wines and spirits at a local Tesco store, worked my way up to store manager, then moved to Sainsbury's, then went into property, actually, where we done construction work on refits and new builds on retailers. Then I worked for Darren, actually, for 3 years, where we supported Tesco's with their counters, and then moved into national accounts, and here I am since. So I've kind of worked in the coalface, sold to the coalface, supported them in an operational role, and now I'm, for want of a better word, peddling their data for them on their behalf. So, and I'm looking forward to presenting today.
Peddling, no joke, with a bike behind you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, fabulous. Sam Pearl from Cranswick, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Sam Pearl. So I am the site director at Cranswick Milton Keynes. So Cranswick are a meat, livestock and agriculture business, which can be a difficult place to be when we're talking about sustainability, to be perfectly honest. What we do at Milton Keynes is cook meats predominantly, so we're sort of producing end consumer product for a number of the retailers. My background actually is retail, so I spent 13 years at Tesco's in a number of commercial and strategy roles before coming into Cranswick. We've got sort of a big sustainability program. It's something that as a business we're very passionate about, and it's something that myself and the leadership team are very passionate about. We wouldn't call ourselves sustainability experts by any stretch of imagination, but it's a responsibility as we see it. It's something we take very seriously, something we've got a lot of passion about, and we're trying very hard to make progress. So I'll be talking about sustainability from that perspective today.
Brilliant. Sam, thank you. Very welcome. And my next guest speaker, Vera Moser from Unilever. Please, would you introduce yourself?
Hi guys, and best regards from Rotterdam. I'm not Dutch, I'm Austrian, by the way. And sustainability is really in my personal DNA. I've grown up with small scale organic farming in Austria, clean lakes. I'm not a tree hugger. I really get a kick out of driving sustainable, responsible growth that really, gets me out of bed. I've been in Unilever for 23 years, and my excuse why I'm still at Unilever is because it has never been boring. My career has developed over the years immensely. I worked on a local, regional, and global level in marketing as well in sales. I always jumped lanes out of curiosity. And for the past 5 years, I created a job for myself, which is leading the sustainability agenda for our sales function. Didn't exist beforehand because marketing invents products, R&D, creates new clean formulations. Factories are making the locations eco-friendly, carbon neutral, or even carbon positive. So the question was really, what's our sustainability contribution as a sales function? And that's what I have been driving with a lot of fulfillment. So that's me.
Thank you, Vera. We have 4 fabulous speakers for you today. We have a question on the screen. We're going to spend about 60 seconds on this. So the question is, how many more times is the carbon footprint of digital shelf edge labels versus paper ones? And if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat your answer, it's going to be a number. Let's do a bit of fun for 60 seconds, and then we'll see if we can arrange a prize. So how many times do you think? Carbon footprint of digital. Okay, so Oliver's saying 25. Let's have a look at the chat. 100. Okay, that's bold. 25, 10, 100, 5, 10, 30. I'm going to turn that off. 50. 55.3. Must be someone who's a left-brainer. 75.
That's very specific from Andy Palmer.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you all. So the answer is, I'm going to ask Steve to spend 60 seconds on this. Steve, why is it 38.6?
Well, just to make sure that we understand what this means, the analysis here was between like a digital shelf edge and a printed sort of like poster or posted a part of it, refreshed every 6 weeks over a 3-year period. And this was a very detailed life cycle analysis. So, you know, we spend a lot of times, I spend a lot of times where people turn around and say, yeah, we're looking to go to digitalization. We want to put screens into stores. And sort of people tend to not really see that as there's any sustainable impact. You know, I've even seen major retailers use the words, we're going digital and putting digital screens in to save the planet because we're not printing something. So really, it's having that discussion and that educated discussion. Now, I'm sure that someone might be able to produce an LCA to say the opposite in the future or a different way. But, you know, this is the first one that I've really seen that I've looked at, that's looked at manufacturing, transport, usage and disposal of a digital screen versus an absolute comparison of a digital alternative. And there is 38 times more carbon based upon a digital screen. So it opens the discussion, and I think that's one thing that will lead in really nicely today with the other speakers and how we, you know, look at everyone's journey, because we're all on slightly different journeys, not to use an overused X factor word, but we are, and it's fascinating to open those conversations. So I hope this at least opens that up. So thanks for everyone for putting their figures in.
All right, lovely. So our winners are Shaid Mahmood, Han Pause, can't pronounce that, I'm afraid, Ian Downey, Andy Palmer, you're close. Okay, so if you guys listen for the doorbell, the Amazon delivery with a prize will be there very soon.
Delivered sustainably.
All right, let's move on. You've heard from our speakers. This is what they're going to talk about in the next 50 minutes. We're going to start with Russ, then we're moving on to Vera, then Steve, Sam, Pearl. I'll moderate, take your questions in the chat at any point. What we are going to do is take a couple of questions after each speaker, and then we should have about 10-15 minutes at the end for any questions for our panel. We are in some very esteemed company today, from Amazon to Tesco to Sainsbury's to Asda to Dunnes to Co-op. You're all very welcome. Thank you for being part of our sustainable conversation. Okay, with no more to do, I'm going to pass over to our triathlete, Russ, with your bike.
Yeah, triathlete in my mind has been terrible at 3 sports instead of just the one. Actually, Dan, I can't see the slides my side, but if everyone else can see them, then that's fine. I can wing it.
Yeah, we can
see them.
Yep, we can.
Everyone else can see them. Yeah,
we're good.
Okay, so thank you very much. And so, for the first slide, where we talk about sustainability remains increasingly important with the increase in prioritising health. So this comes from a survey that we conducted with our home scan panelists. So we've got a panel of just under 15,000 people, and we survey them every year as part of State of the Nation. And just beware, this is claimed behaviour, and why that's really important is anyone that's been to the dentist or the doctor, if you manage to get an appointment and they say to you, how many units of alcohol do you drink a week? You add it up and then you divide it by 2 and then you give the answer. Okay, so it's exactly the same. Okay, so we're only human. So 92% during the when we done this survey said that health and wellness was either important to them or really important to them. And then as we move across, we asked a similar question: how important is sustainability to you? And we've got 34% of respondents responded either very important or important. And within that breakdown, 76% of respondents wanted to reduce food waste, 64% wanted to reduce plastic consumption, 58% wanted to buy more locally, and 56% climate change was important to them. And then what I haven't pulled on the slide, but I can guarantee you, is that 64% that said they want to reduce plastic consumption, if I created a buyer group on my panel of the people that responded to said, I want to reduce plastic, I guarantee they're still buying exactly the same amount of single-use plastic as they were previously. Okay, so it's really important that we look at claimed behaviour versus reality. If you can move on to the next slide for me, please, Dad. Okay, so we've got just a map here, and this is using one of our tools called Spectra, but it's our panel that is disaggregated. And then the map on the left-hand side shows where respondents have replied that sustainability is very important to them. So you can see here there's some real hotspots, so like London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Glasgow, and you can see the rest of the country is probably a little bit of work to do in terms of education and understanding and getting them up to the level where sustainability is important to them. And then on the right-hand side, it's literally the same question, but where respondents replied it's moderately important. And again, we've got hotspot pockets there, but there's still a lot of work to be done during the centre of the country. Next slide, please, Darren. So unsurprisingly, the more affluent and the younger you are, the more likely you are to pay for sustainability or to switch to ethical brands and products. I won't go into too much of the detail there, but you can see that AB, which is the most affluent, 48%, are looking to source more ethically and sustainable products. And then on the other side, you can see where we've got the mature. So we've got the pre-families, 44%, and then we've got the new families, 37%, which drops. And then it tails back up and then drops down again for the older single and the older generation. So I think that the more affluent and the younger shoppers are adopting sustainability. I think through education, social media, but also, let's be frank, they may not have a mortgage to pay, they may not have 2 kids to feed, etc., etc. Next slide, please, Daz. So what we are seeing in the marketplace is that retailers and manufacturers are actually listening to consumer concerns and trying to address them. And my opinion is that we can educate as much as we want, but as I said before, if there are still single-use plastic bottles on a shelf, a consumer will still buy them. And my opinion is that retailers and manufacturers really have to take the lead on this for this to land with our shoppers. So we're seeing some really great stuff that's happening. So we've seen that Asda and Morrison's and other retailers are launching what used to be Quick Save back in the day, or Weigh and Save, where you used to scoop up your stuff and buy your own products, for those of you old enough to remember that. But they're moving plastic packaging for more bananas. Tesco's are offering sustainability linked supply chain finance to more ethical companies. PG Tips are making biodegradable products, which is really great to see. And I think what we need to do is just make sure that ultimately, to change shoppers' behaviour, we're going to have to force them, unfortunately. There are some that will change it because they want to, but ultimately I think there's a lack of education as well within the shopper, in the shopper's minds. For an example is, you know, you get onions in a little nylon sock, and then they got put into plastic bags, and shoppers bought the nylon ones because there was less packaging and they thought it was more sustainable, but actually that nylon cannot be recycled, whereas the plastic could be. So there's a lot of education that we need to take with shoppers. If we just move on to the next slide, please, Daz. So this is dummy data. So if we've got any retailers on here and I have not represented your share correctly for the current time period, I apologise, but this is dummy data. And what I can see happening is, and Nielsen are working towards this with the acquisition of Brand Bank 6 years ago, and now the acquisition of things like Label Insights and Data Impact, is where I actually think we're going to get to a point of where you're going to have a set of metrics when you're doing a range review that's going to include things such as CO2, share of single-use plastic, because what we're seeing is, as we've seen on the previous slide, retailers are making really bold claims. Like Tesco's are saying, we've removed 1 billion pieces of plastic from our supply chain. Is that 1 billion from 10 billion, 1 billion from 100 billion? There's no benchmark to that. And at the moment, the retailers that are winning the sustainability war are the ones that are better at marketing that and getting that message across, rather than potentially actually doing what they say they're going to do. So I can definitely see a set of metrics coming through that will be part of this. And I'll just use the example of share of single-use plastic, which is something we're trying to work towards. We just move on to the next slide, please, Daz. Thanks. So just a quick summary. So just remember, what shoppers claim versus what they do are very different, and that needs to be considered. There's room for improvement across the UK. More affluent and younger shoppers are more likely to adopt ethical and sustainable brands, and we need to take the rest of the population on that journey. Manufacturers and retailers need to react to the consumers, as ultimately you're driving that behaviour. And the attribution of packaging, as I've just shown, so CO2, nutrition, will add new dynamics to metrics going forward, rather than just distribution and rate of sale. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. I particularly like the analogy of going to the doctor and lying about how much alcohol. I'm sure none of us have done that. So
absolutely not.
Let's just take a pause for a moment. Any questions in our chat for Russ, particularly about what you've seen over the last 10 minutes? Please put them in the chat. We'll ask Russ while we just prepare for Vera to come on with her slides. So any questions for Russ in the chat, please? I'm thinking of my days as a buyer, Russ, and metrics around sustainability, CO2. Yeah, we didn't do any of that. It's a whole lot more complex.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Russ. We haven't got any questions at this stage. Vera, over to you.
Yeah, Darren, you asked me the question, how will we cater to shopper expectations in the years to come? And I think it's ideal in the flow of the session that Russ just set the scene. So moving on to the next slide, we really have to step into the shoes of our consumers. Do they actually care? And yes, with COVID, hygiene is of course top of mind and a massive issue. Consumers, shoppers have started to shop more and more online. We know from the Amazon research then consumers complain that they get the box in the box in the box in the box. Yes, they are of carton, but still so much waste, so much stuff that I actually didn't want to pay and also buy and get. We hear about climate crisis. Actually, it's hitting hard. It's hitting home from wildfires to flooding, heat waves. It's crazy, and people are definitely aware of it. The question is then, how do they act differently? When we at Unilever mention sustainability, we see it that it's about health of the planet and also health of the people. And that's why I'm bringing here also at the bottom left corner, there is this isolation issue, and the mental health and well-being has never been higher on the agenda than in these times. At the same time, there's a call for justice and for a fairer, more inclusive world, from Black Lives Matter to Justice for All, there is a real call out to take action and not only give words. And then lastly, I think it's super exciting, the jump in data transformation and digital transformation that's happening at the same time. Is it on a business level as well as on a consumer level? I mean, my parents, they are above 75. They are shopping online. So this is not only a phenomenon of young technology or data, young guys only. So what does it mean in terms of shopping on a supermarket level? I'm moving to the next slide. Oh, no, I wanted to first give a Unilever perspective. So now, please, next slide. Absolutely fine. At Unilever, our purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. And we have 3 strategic directions. One is improve the health of the planet. Second one is improve people's health, confidence and well-being. And the third one is contribute to fairer and more socially inclusive world. So that's what we define as sustainability. And when I tell you I'm leading the sustainability agenda for the sales function, then it really goes into all 3 pillars. We have broken it down then into sub-pillars, or we call it the growth platforms. And on these levels, that's where you see climate action, protect and regenerate nature, waste-free world, for example. On that level, we are having discussions with the retailers, because we realized we need to help retailers shape differentiated growth roadmaps and growth profiles and programs. And then we have to dive deeper and really understand, what are we focusing on? Just health of the planet is too wide. Our strategy, our purpose is fully underpinned by our categories and divisions. That's where beauty comes in, home care with Clean Future, and then also our foods portfolio. And all of our top brands have purposes. They are a force for good. Again, on a healthy planet as well as a people health side. Now I wanted to address your answer, Darren, on what does 2022 look like? On the next slide. Well, actually 2022, it's already done and dusted, isn't it? I mean, we are already absolutely in execution mode. So I have here chosen 3 real life examples from the marketplace. On the left-hand side, you see a Sainsbury program where, and Russ mentioned it, it's so important that we drive behavior change, that we help educate shoppers, that we reward them, that we make it easy for them to take action. I chose the Sainsbury example because it was wonderfully, so it was about, the flagship brands were brands that are eco-friendly because of better or less packaging. And then it was linked to the Nectar Points, to the loyalty program. And the anecdote is that this program was so successful that the Sainsbury team evaluated it twice because they couldn't believe the sales results. That's the anecdote I heard. But why I chose it, really, we need to reward the shoppers for making more eco-friendly choices. The second example in the middle is not on the healthy planet, but on this more socially inclusive side. It's our Pride program with the LGBTQ community that we have already run for more than 3 years with Superdrug in the UK. Even COVID couldn't stop it. Yeah, it simply went online. And it's so successful that Superdrug belongs to the A.S. Watson International Group. It will be exported next year in 2022 to more markets of the A.S. Watson's group. And thirdly, I chose an example from Deleuze, Belgium. There we are collaborating with the NGO River Cleanup. And again, it's this, why I chose this example is I think we can really amplify the good we do by collaborating suppliers with retailers, but then also bringing NGOs in. And we can even make the impact bigger by activating the citizens. So in this river cleanup, it has a movement character. Employees from the retailer Deleuze as well as from Unilever go out on a cleanup day. Shoppers go in from the communities. So I think this movement character, the social engagement, helping people real take action is very important in 2022. 2025, Darren, on the next slide. Well, we are doing so many pilots. And if I say we, I mean we as a community, yeah, not only Unilever. So many pilots and tests when it comes to refill and reuse. Here a photo of the Loop pilot that's run in the UK, or the pre-fill, that's where you see the Aster, the planet, the one with the turquoise. So much going on. Also Waitrose Unpacked, and Russ, you mentioned it. Those who can remember, I mean, there were times when we bought the vegetables without any packaging. Or for example, the coffee beans, we just bought them in paper bags, and after paying them, we ground them. Yeah. So I remember when I was a kid in the late 70s, that was exciting. I was allowed to push the button. Yeah. And now I can only buy it with aluminium and lots of waste. Interestingly, there is also Algramo on the left-hand bottom corner. It originated in Chile in 2019. They also want to come to Europe, and they also want to get in-store. It's actually a bulk selling initiative from a van. Now, the question is, by 2025, have we cracked it? At the moment, all these initiatives, all these pilots, they are not sustainably, they are not business viable. They do not have a return on investment. So I think by 2025, the challenge will be that we have cracked it, that we make it work. By the way, on the right top corner, you see the recycling machine we are collaborating on as Unilever with Alibaba in China, and it uses artificial intelligence to help sort. Now, Russ also mentioned it, we need behavior changes. So difficult behavior change doesn't happen overnight. You need to educate and educate and educate. I am wondering, and I'm curious to see what 2025 brings. Will we have refill stations in store, refill, pre-fill, whatever? Up to now, I haven't heard from any retailer that they have already a clear perspective what the store of the future will look like. The return on investment on per centimeter on the shelf, it's much worse when you look at a refill station. It doesn't offer the variety that I, as a personal consumer, want when I look for my hair shampoo, for example. Yeah, because as soon as you go into smaller containers in the refill station, the CO2 footprint goes down because you again have more waste. So we need to crack it. I'm super curious if refill, pre-fill will be the solution, or if it's back to the FMCG and the product innovations. So much is underway on an industry level to get to packaging which is with zero PVC, by the way, with zero single plastic, with packaging that only uses recycled material, that reduces the material input. By the way, for example, I switched from liquid laundry products to concentrated powder in a carton big box. Yes, I'm shopping like my grandma in the 60s, but it has zero plastic, yeah, and it's concentrated powder, and it washes wonderfully. So why are we shipping around liquids in shampoos, I could go on. I'm curious to see what it is, but I think this will be a big challenge, and we need to crack it by 2025. Now 2030, it's further out there on the next slide, but I am challenging if our shopping and our shop floor will really have changed that much by then. Also, Russ mentioned that, yes, consumers say they are willing to pay more. But we need systemic change till 2030 in order to really work against climate change. And we are heading into an even more economic crisis. Inflation is going up like crazy. There is already food poverty and hygiene poverty in the UK today. Will it be easier by 2030? At the same time, our young consumers, the millennials, the Generation Z, who say they want to shop sustainably, they are buying cheap clothing at Primark, wearing it once, twice, and then it's ending up on a rubbish bin. At the same time, the Aral say doesn't have any water anymore because of cotton production, and it's crazy. I really like that Steve mentioned beforehand also the digital screens. Okay, perhaps they are then solar powered with batteries or whatever, but for all that we need rare earths, which are mined by children in not at all an ethical way. And even then, the Chinese are opening one fossil fuel site after and coal site after the other, while we try to shop and consume more sustainably. But then I also said to Darren, I don't want to finish on a bleak view. I really, really believe in our creativity, in our passion, in our drive to find creative solutions. And I really appreciate, Darren, that you bring us here together as a bunch of people who are simply interested, and we will find solutions. So that's it from me. Back to you, Darren.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Vera. And you talk so passionately about this. It comes through to everyone. I particularly was looking at Steve, and Steve's just doing this for the last 10 minutes.
I could listen to Vera all day. I mean, I've been very privileged to work with Unilever over many, many years, and I've always been held them in such huge high regard. They are definitely leading it with their sustainable living plan and have done for many years. So I'm a huge advocate of what Vera has to say.
But really, for me, it's important. It's not about just talking. Yeah.
No.
It's really, and we also don't have all the knowledge. And as also Russ mentioned on the data, we need real sustainability data in our master data. Ideally on a brand level in the first go, because frankly we don't have it holistically, but then also on a product level, because then we as business people can every day make more sustainable choices and business decisions. So please, we do not know it all. We are on a journey, but I think together we can find these solutions.
Thank you, Vera. Let me just pause and go back to our attendees for a moment. Jacinda's saying, love listening to you, Vera. Ashley, really motivating, so well done. Do we have any questions for Vera before we move on to Steve? Let's just see if any come on the chat. We might have time for one or two. If not, we'll wait till the end. Okay, we haven't got any coming up at the moment. Vera, thank you. Steve, we're over to you. You've got about 10, 12 minutes to try and top that.
Well, it's always difficult to turn with too great. No pressure then, Darren. Okay, so look, I'm going to touch on a couple of things here. I'm going to do a sustainable scene setting, really, just to take a look at where we are at the moment. And I'm going to focus on sort of like the retail areas and look at some sustainable retail pioneers. Now, look, I could have taken up a whole hour here, not 10 minutes. I could have put 50 slides up just with Unilever and the amazing work they've done in different countries. I'm not here to big Unilever up, but I'm just saying there is a lot I had to condense it down. Because both previous speakers have said, this is really, really important. We're getting to a point now where we can't just talk about it, like Vera said. And we've just had COP. We've just had, one of the biggest, things in the world here. And, some of our world leaders came along and fell asleep, in the opening speeches. Okay, bless him. He'd been on the rounds around the world, flying around in his jet. But, this is a really important subject, and, people have to take interest in it, and unfortunately, some of the things that we've seen over the last few weeks is, some of our leaders aren't taking it that seriously, and maybe, looking after individual countries, sort of like, themselves. But for me, just a couple of slides there, just to say, look, it is important. Have I been unfair showcasing those two guys? Yes, probably have. But for me, I look back over the last couple of years and the work I've been doing, purely looking at brands and retailers, and of course, it's been tough. Whether you're in retail, whether in hospitality, whether in bars, restaurants, and cafes around the world, it's been horrendous with the impact that COVID has had. On not just consumer behaviour, what's been closed. But one thing we have really looked at, and I have actually seen, is a lot of the boring retailers, a lot of the retailers that really didn't give that experience, and I'm not going to use the experiential word any more than just once, is consumers still need to be entertained. They still want to have a shop to go to. They still want to feel like their money's being spent in a good way. And a lot of these, big, retailers have really lost their way, and consumers' demands changed. So one thing we do know is boring retail is dead. It really is. But sustainable retail is absolutely flourishing. And I'm going to show you some examples, moving forward of some great retailers are doing some great work. One thing I will caveat this with is making sustainable decisions has never been harder. It's never been more complex. And there's a lot of greenwashing out there. And if you haven't heard of the word greenwashing, it just really means that people are making claims that they can't, substantiate, or maybe stretching the truth a little bit. So that's really my sort of caveat here, is just beware. People are making lots of claims about they are sustainable, or products are sustainable, or services are sustainable. Just do your homework and understand it, and make sure that you're well educated. Now, for me, sustainable focuses can be confusing. We've got government legislation in each country, which is consistently changing and confusing. Vera today is in Rotterdam. She comes from Austria. I bet those two countries have got completely different focuses on, recycling and plastics and all sorts of things. And in different countries across Europe and around the world, retailers set their own sustainable initiatives, goals and targets. But as consumers, we really want the right thing to do. We do want to reduce. We have, Sam was saying, and Darren was saying, do they just make claims about it? I think really consumers want to do the right thing. They do want to recycle. They do want to reduce, and they do want to reuse things. Like we said in the last couple of slides, before, we need to help them make those changes. But communicating sustainability has also been confusing, because companies have corporate CSR strategies. Well, that was the big thing a few years ago, to have a corporate social responsibility program. Well, now it's all ESG, and everyone's saying, well, what the hell is ESG? Well, whether it's environmental, social, or governance, people, planet, communities and commitments, so people are saying, well, what am I actually laddering up to? Am I laddering up to the United Nations sustainability goals or something else? Products, again, Vera made a really good point there about Unilever. Clear visibility of production, clear visibility of materials and the impacts they have. That's what consumers need. And then you look at supply chains. We need ethical supply chains with transparency. Clear, visible, visibility is absolutely essential when it comes to it. But we also then have conflicting demands, which don't help. We've got brands want impactful, effective, and engaging store experiences, but retailers pretty much have restrictive criteria about what you can and can't do. I can only have a display this big. You can't go this wide. You're not allowed to put electrical items in here. You can't put flashing lights. You can't put these things. So retailers, and I understand why they have retail guidelines. I get that. Otherwise, it would be a complete free-for-all and a mess inside the stores. But as consumers, and we're all consumers on this call today, we want brands and those retailers to deliver to our needs. We want them to be engaging, impactful experiences when we go in, and feel like the retailer's doing the right thing. So I just wanted to touch on a few slides here with some of the things that I've seen. Pioneers like Lush. Lush, great stores, incredible ingredients, have taken up the mantle of the Body Shop and have really moved forward. But I just want to touch on a thing here, is they take back their black pots from consumers, and they've got a recycling centre down in Poole where they actually chip it all together and they make it back into the signage that goes into the shops. So that black square you see in the bottom right-hand corner, that they used to be old pots. So again, it's that circular thinking that these brands and retailers are now really starting to move on. And I said there about the Body Shop. You know, do you need everything in a plastic bottle? No, you don't. You can do refills. And like Vera said, you know, we are now seeing companies moving towards retail systems, you know, and we're seeing with Asda doing their sort of like, you know, trial store, and Tesco's using the new loop, of which I know Unilever are part of that, you know, campaign as well. But these are all test and learning. You know, again, like Vera said, you know, these brands and retailers don't know really where it's going to end up. You know, is it going to be in refill? Is it going to be in smaller amounts? Is it going to be in plastic free? So the great thing is these trials are happening and consumers are seeing them, you know. But then there's other changes that are happening, which is really encouraging, and we're seeing some great stuff, or I'm seeing some great stuff with fantastic retailers like Co-op or Cooperative Group. They've made some really subtle changes in store. They've looked at all their plastic signage. They're doing some trials with moving them all to more fiber-based materials, printing directly onto them, 100% recyclable at the end of life. Really subtle, but fantastic. When you look at it, these are really big steps forward. You might not know about it. They might have done it under the radar, but you know what? These guys are really leading the way when it comes to sustainable signage and sustainable retail. The same with retailers like M&S. We're seeing here is this was just a small change that we saw, that they replaced all of their display header panels in all of their stores from foam PVC over to a fiber board overnight, no fanfare, didn't really tell anybody, just got on it and done it, and it aligns with their Plan A process. So again, moving away from a hard to recycle product, which foam PVC is, you know, over to a fiber based, which can be recycled at the back of store, dead easy. And then we're looking at test and trial. I just wanted to highlight one of these. This came from Primark, and again, Vera makes the point about throwaway clothing. You know, are Primark sustainable when they say they make a 99p t-shirt? You know, that probably people will wear only a few times. That's not for me really to judge today, but for me to look at this is they did a big piece in Box Park where they set up this small wellness trial around the different materials they were using, waste in their displays. They were moving towards, you know, cardboard coat hangers. They did all the learning in a small place, and then they've started to embed it into their larger stores. So again, test and learn, really important when it comes to learning what works, what doesn't work before launching it. Because, hey, if you've got thousands of stores around the world, you can't just launch something in 3,000, 5,000 stores overnight. You do have to do that test and learn. And we're seeing other brands that are doing it really, really well as well. So, you know, whether it's Converse, whether it's Adidas moving away from plastics, we're seeing lots of wood. We're seeing lots of craft brown materials. We're seeing lots of pledges about moving away from plastics. So it's evolving, and this whole look and feel is evolving around what to use and what consumers are seeing as they're using. And the last example here, I wanted to put with Nike. I'm very fortunate to have been doing some work over the last 3 or 4 months with a fantastic company called Chai with Nike over in America, in Portland, looking at different materials. And I just wanted to showcase this one. Nike are looking at moving towards a circularity program with lots of different materials. And then they're now bringing it into store called Move to Zero. They're actually using some of the trash or the waste in their displays to really highlight it. And they've got a product in the bottom right-hand corner, a product called Nike Grind, where they're taking manufacturing waste, compressing it into panels, and then using it in store. So they're having a whole circular process now with taking retail waste and putting it back into retail displays, which I commend them for, because it's a fantastic program, which they now do globally. But just my last 2 slides, I wanted to say, you know, what is the future of retail? Because so many people say to me, what is the future of sustainability, Steve? And I just look at it and go, hey, look, not everything can be printed onto brown craft paper. It doesn't work that way. And there's a massive demand for craft board at the moment. Those prices are going up and availability of it's coming down. So the demand for it is huge, but not everything can be wrapped in that. So what's my prediction for the future? Well, my prediction probably is not everything is going to be wrapped up in brown paper and string. Maybe in the future, sustainability is going to be embedded into a product, which you won't see because it's just in there. It might just be more pure of a product. It is FSC. It is 100% recycled. You know, the glass is 100% recyclable. the labels are done in a certain way that they can be removed at end of life. So maybe the future of sustainability in retail is more around hidden sustainability, where the DNA of sustainability is built into that product at the beginning. So that was really my slides. I'm mindful of hitting the time, which I've done. Any questions you've got, please ask. If not, leave them to the end. But thanks very much.
Steve, thank you very much. Whilst we let Sam take control, we'll just go over to our chat. Does anyone have any questions for Steve? Please bring them in. Meanwhile, I'll just put this one to Russ. Russ, it's quite a complex question, but I'll just read it out to you. How do you suggest balancing initiatives like Naked Bread, as Co-op are doing, with the decreased shelf life and therefore increased food wastage associated? I don't know if you can answer that. I don't know if you've got an opinion, but if you can.
I've got an opinion on it. I mean, this is where, it's the responsibility of the purchaser. So if you buy a loaf of bread, right, and you're not going to use all of it, put the other half in the freezer. It's not hard, right? That's how I see it. I don't think, although I said retailers and manufacturers have to take lead on it, they can, but ultimately, they can only do so much. And it does come down to, I've bought a naked loaf of bread. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to use half. And I'm going to put the other half in the freezer. I'm not trying to be flippant, but there's only so much we can do.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We'll come back to Lydia's question. She's got a bit more on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll come back. Shall I just put it on? Go on.
I should say, from my experience, even when I was in retail, it got sent to farmers. So what I've seen is that naked bread would then get moved on into the supply chain for animal feed, and it also gets donated. So I can only speak why I live locally. So we've got something called the Bistalada where I live, and all the bread that's naked gets put into crates, and it gets put to a central place where people that don't have the income or the means to buy anything, they just go and take it. So there are ways around it. There are definitely ways around it. Nothing should be getting thrown away, especially food.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you. Vera was nodding through that, so we're getting some yeses. We're also getting lots of love in this, lots of claps, lots of cheers. So thank you, Steve, for doing that. Sam, we haven't got long. We've got about 10 minutes, but we're going to give you all the 10 minutes for your slides. Sam, over to you.
Yeah, no problem. Good morning, everyone. I was just reflecting on the sustainability of my webinar presenting career. Actually, I think if you keep putting me after Vera and Steve, I'm not sure I'll last too long. I've come across excellently. I'll pick up from a point that Steve made, actually, just around the complexity and how hard this is. And I guess we're conscious of that. And when we think about shopper landscape, and we think about shopper mindset, in reality, we can look at ourselves. We're all consumers. We know how difficult this topic is, how complex it is. We all know we're learning. We're all learning as we go. A point that Vera made. And when we think about sort of shoppers and we think about our own business, actually, we've looked at it using this growth and this training map. Actually, how we educate ourselves will affect the decisions that we make, the work that we can do, the contribution that we can make. And actually, as we're going through this learning, actually we're moving up this competency ladder in this incredibly difficult topic. And so that's the way that we framed it with our business, and the way we're framing it to help us understand where shoppers are as well. So I'll sort of take you through that. But I definitely know from my perspective, and with a lot of my peers in the industry, we were really uncomfortable with our level of knowledge in this area. There's no doubt about that. I was sat blissfully, comfortably on the bottom rung, completely unconsciously incompetent about this. This wasn't part of my everyday language. It wasn't part of any of my business meetings. It wasn't part of any of my consumer thought process. And I landed very uncomfortably, very forcefully on the second rung, where I suddenly realised that actually I know nothing about this. And the awareness that I knew nothing about this was a wake-up call, and we've invested heavily in learning to try to move us up this scale. And that journey is what I very much see being mirrored with consumers right now, that they're looking for education, that they're hungry to know a little bit more, and sort of I'll take you through how I see that change, I guess, in knowledge progressing as we go through. So it's only really been in the mainstream media, I would say, 2 to 5 years probably from where we've really started to get under the skin of this topic. This is probably, I guess, the sort of progression I'm looking to see, I'm expecting to see in consumers. So I'll try to take you through how I see that mapping out. 2022, Vera has already alluded to this, we're there effectively. What's going to happen next year has largely been set. Consumer psyche, consumer desire here, massively want to make a difference. There's a real thirst for knowledge. There's a real thirst and desire to want to do things differently. But this is complex, and that level of knowledge is relatively low. So this is really about trying to keep it simple. It's about trying to give consumers simple opportunities to make better decisions, to feel that they're able to contribute. And we're seeing brands doing this already, actually. So carbon neutral labelling, Brewdog very famously, carbon negative. We've got Lidl Cheese, I saw the other day, have come out and labelled their cheddar through their supply chain as carbon neutral cheddar cheese. Do consumers fully understand the jargon? No, they don't. Do they need to at this stage? Probably not. Actually, these messages are good. They're helping us, right? It gives me an opportunity as a consumer to make some different decisions in the brands and the products I choose. So that's good. We're seeing other similar sorts of patterns in terms of consumer demand and consumer communication. So meat is bad, veg and plant-based is good. The shift to a flexitarian diet, the shift away from meat into veg and plant-based products is there to be seen. There's lots of examples in retail now where we're seeing brands, consumers, manufacturers trying to cater, trying to help the consumer at this really early stage. Actually, can I make some slightly different purchasing decisions? Can I alter my diet slightly with a view to actually that being slightly better for the planet? And again, you take that on further. Plastic's been talked about already. Plastic is bad. Plastic's killing our oceans. How do I consume less of it? How do I contribute to less of it being in the chain? And again, Vera's used some of these, as did Steve, some of these examples already, where we're seeing brands, businesses, consumers wanting to get away from plastic. So I think at this early stage in 2022 that there's just a huge desire to just give consumers a little bit more information, give them some different choices to try to help them on that journey. I think as we wind that forward, it gets broader, it gets more nuanced, and the desire for transparency grows. A lot of the overly simplistic views by this point will have dissipated, and there'll be a real thirst for a deeper knowledge. And there's a good parallel, I think, here with the early 2000s with nutritional labelling. Before nutritional labelling was prevalent, that there was just very simplistic views. If I think about myself and my family, takeaways are bad for me, mum's cooking's good for me. The fact my mum put a kilo of butter and 2 pints of cream in the mashed potato that tasted absolutely awesome. But the fact that she did, and that was perceived to be better for me than the chips from the chippy, I'm not sure was quite right. And therefore the level of transparency that was then brought once we started to understand nutritionals was helpful. And that parallel is going to be there with sustainability. It's going to have to be there. Consumers will crave and demand that we get to this point with our sustainability labelling. You're starting to see some of this already. Certainly the carbon trust labelling, lots of you I'm sure will be very familiar with. This is on pints of milk in most of the supermarkets at the moment, as an example, lots of other places as well. But you're starting to get to the point where you're seeing a little bit more information. It'll go beyond this is carbon negative, I'm carbon neutral as a brand. It will go into actually trying to understand the life cycle of the product. But that'll often have to go further as well. It can't just be about carbon. This has got to be about the complete chain, the complete life cycle. Where else what else are we impacting? Water, as a great example, is rarely sort of ignored within these, but has a huge environmental impact. That will have to get a far deeper level of eco scoring to really help us understand where we can make a difference. And even if we do want to make choices to make a difference in reality, I believe you'll get to a point where it just becomes commonplace on products. These are just mocked up, but commonplace on products that every product will have a sustainability score. It will have a transparency to it in the same way that we've got nutritional labelling, and that transparency is key. It's really key for us all to be educated to drive progress. Some of the overly simplistic views will have gone. Actually, we'll find that not all veg and plant-based products are good for the environment. Not all meat products are bad. Actually, not all plastics, has been already alluded to. Not all plastics around products actually are a bad thing. The transparency will drive that education. The transparency will drive the ability for consumers to make better choices, which is what they'll want to do and what they'll demand. I think as we roll that right forward, you'll get to a far more holistic picture. I think a lot of what we're talking about from a sustainability point of view is planet at the moment. That's no bad thing. What will start to happen is the airtime between planet and people will actually start to equalise, I think, and we're starting to talk about people and social impact as well as just planet when we're talking about sustainability. Well, yeah, the equality piece will absolutely be, whether that's gender pay gap as that icon references, or what broader equality pieces. Are we as businesses and brands, are we really diverse? Are we really inclusive? We'll start to be talking far more about social impact. And I think sort of the pieces here is the expectation will shift. It will shift from what we do to how we do it. How we do it will become what we're judged upon, and I think consumers ultimately will vote for their fee. If we're hidden as businesses and as brands, and we're not seen to be overtly contributing to society, we're not putting more in than we're taking out, actually consumers will vote with their feet. You'll start to see people turning away from brands, businesses, retailers as a result of probably what they don't see, actually, the years of hidden businesses being able to sit there with huge profits and therefore justifying massive multiples on the stock market. In reality won't be there. They'll have to have more of a presence than that. They have to overtly have more of a presence. And I think if they don't, you'll start to end up seeing consumers voting in that way.
Sam, thank you. That was passionate, and also a great amount of humility at the start there, Sam, where you didn't know anything and you've been on a journey.
Still don't know very much.
Well, I'm still on the bottom rung, but that's just me. Let me answer a couple of questions that are coming through on the chat. I'm loving that these guys are talking to each other. Vera's put a couple of questions on there, which is brilliant. And also what's coming through on the chat is, let's have a look. Will there be a recording of this? Yeah, we'll email you out a recording. I'm aware we're out of time, but if you want to stay, have you got any questions for our panel? I'm sure I can persuade them to stay for a couple of minutes. What questions do you have? I'll just read out some of the things while we're waiting. Good piece of insight. Just because it's plant doesn't mean it's good for the environment. As a vegan myself, there is a lot of packaging in the area. Yeah, cool.
Sarah gave a good question around if we're moving away from plastic, and the focus will be on, will we move away from wood and cardboard in the future? I think we will. I think there'll be more products out there that will use circularity and use waste as a resource rather than just a piece of waste. I mean, actually, the word waste is the wrong word. Once we start to look at end of life products in a different way, then we can make them into different things. So, if we get rid of the word waste and use it in a different way, we can actually use it as the next material. So to answer Sarah's question is, yeah, we might even move away from cardboard and wood. It might end up being like Nike making circular materials. And, I know that the cooperative and co-op group are using lots of different ways of collecting plastics and, and different things. So I think it will mature as we go along.
Vera, you've got a take on that as well?
Yeah, I think it's really important that the important insight is once you put a value to something, then it's worth something. Yeah. By the way, as an Austrian, I really had to smile. I've never heard the expression naked bread. Guess what? In Austria, I'm going to a bakery shop and I get the bread in my car, in my paper bag. So naked bread is my vocabulary of the day. But on what I wanted to add to the waste and the plastic, I think it's really important that we not only move to recycled material, but that also we reduce material usage and material input. And that I love the example of Lush. I mean, why does a soap have an extra carton box even around it? But we also see, by the way, recycling systems are not only on a country level different, very often it depends even on the street. When I lived in Germany, every street had a different recycling system and different bags. It's crazy. But putting a value to it. And then the key insight also for us is as soon as there is a cost factor which is unacceptable, then you start rethinking. And that's in favor of sustainability as well.
Thank you, Vera. I'm just going to pose this question. Steve, it's for you, I think. Is there a standard to follow for sustainability like BSI or ISO?
It's always been a difficult one. I mean, at Popeye, the Point of Purchase Association, they're actually working on things called their sustainability standard, where you can start to bring your company up to a certain standard. And that's a brilliant one. If no one's looked at that, go onto Popeye website and look under sustainability, and you can find that on their website. There's not a scoring system on displays or anything at the moment. We're doing a big thing. I've just launched at stevelister.com and Popeye. We've just launched a latest report. In fact, it was a groundbreaking report, never been done before, looking at what happens to all the print and POS at the end of life. And all of that. So if you get a chance, take a look on the Popeye website or come to my website and have a look as well. The reason for bringing that up is we ask questions around what happens with all of this print and stuff at back of store. And actually, it was quite frightening that actually people just assume that because it's made from cardboard, it's recycled at the end of life. Now, there's some amazing examples in there where some of the retailers we went to did some incredible stuff. But there is a disparity between people saying, yes, we do it. Of course, we recycle everything. And then when you challenge people, they went, I wasn't quite sure what we did with it. So, it is a challenge, but we're moving forward with it. But what I will say is I think there will be a standard. The only negative side on things like logos and things like that is the last time I looked at ecolabellindex.com, there was over 356 eco labels in the world.
Vera, let's bring you in on that.
Yeah, and the funny thing is with the labels, the certified ones are those that you can understand the least ones. It's really crazy. What I wanted to add here on the recyclability of POS material, one more shocking fact to wake you up is 20 to 40% of the POS material we produce never ends up at the point of sale. It never even has a chance to sell. And why? Because it gets destroyed in the process or damaged and is not pretty enough anymore, or it simply ends up in the warehouse or in the back of the car of the sales representative. So not only by making things recyclable, reducing the input, we also need to be become more effective in our operations. And I think that's where the naked bread discussion also comes in.
Hey, Vera, I've got an idea for you about getting compliance levels up in the future.
Which is?
Maybe. Well, I've seen something the other day which was incredible, which had a little QR code on, which engaged the consumer to click on it because it had a sustainability message, but it also sent a message back to the brand to say that piece of POS was installed into that shop. Now, that was quite clever, that I thought that it engaged it, because as we all know, compliance levels, and anyone who doesn't know on the call here what compliance level means, is what Vera said is 75-80% gets installed, but 20% just sits in the back of somewhere. And you think Unilever have paid all this money for the print industry to print all this stuff, and it's not even put out. And you just think, how can that happen? But I saw something the other day which I thought was really neat, and that is connecting a sustainable message with a QR code, and then gave a message back to the retailer and the brand to say if it had been, well, sorry, not the retailer, the brand, to say it had been put out.
All right, we're just going to take two more questions. I'm just conscious we don't want to keep these guys longer than we said. Russ, I'm just going to come to you for this one for an opinion. How do we get to a point where all retailers sign something like a pledge to allow us all to move in the same direction? Just that you look at the whole market, all retailers, any ideas?
No idea. I mean, I know what they're all working hard to try and become more sustainable internally, but I agree they do need to talk to each other. A great example of this was Co-op when they created their compostable carrier bag.
Yeah.
And they then shared the patent free of charge to the other retailers to use if they wanted to. So that's a great example of where they're talking to each other. But I do think it's a time where they need to push egos aside and talk to each other and, divide and conquer, so to speak.
Well, unfortunately, people use it as a competitive advantage these days.
Yeah.
So we maybe need to remove the competitive advantage on sustainability and make it something that is embedded across all retailers.
I like it. All right, our last question. I'm going to come to Sam, and then we'll wrap up. Sam, what are your thoughts, or it keeps moving, on how food manufacturers and retailers push change via consumer discomfort in an effective and pacey way? Sam, any opinion?
I'll just very quickly touch on the last point, and I'll cover that. You are seeing a bit of this collaboration now. There was something launched recently called the UK Soy Manifesto, which has got a lot of collaboration from retailers and manufacturers in it. It's massively needed. So, is it fully comprehensive? No. Is it covering all aspects? Soy is a massive challenge for us as an industry, and so you are seeing some collaborations. It is starting to happen. It needs more of it. Consumer discomfort one is interesting. I would personally be of the view it's going to be about education rather than discomfort. I think if we try to get to a point where we force consumers to make a change that they're not comfortable with, I'm not sure that will necessarily work. There's certain difficult decisions that as manufacturers and retailers we need to make, but I think we need to make them with education in mind. So possibly not the answer he was looking for, but I don't think it will get to a point where we're making decisions that make customers uncomfortable in the short term. I think it will be more about giving transparency. Transparency will drive education. Education will drive progression. I think is where it will go.
Awesome. Great answer, Sam. All right. A big thank you to Steve, to Sam, to Vera, to Russ. You guys were amazing. You guys as attendees were amazing as well, because you're starting to talk to each other, which is really brilliant. And if you want to come to our next webinar at Stores of the Future, although we think we might have Sustainability Part 2, we'll keep you abreast of that. Thank you all to everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Take
Bye
care.
all. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm going to stop recording first. Stop recording.